Welcome, friends, to the space between the worlds. It is XR. Tonight, we are stepping away from the ordinary. We are leaving behind the world of electric lights, humming screens, and the mundane rush of the Muggle day. Tonight, we return to the roots of magic. You know the stories of your own childhood. You know of glass slippers lost on palace steps, of spinning wheels that prick fingers, and of wolves who dress in grandmother's clothes. In the world you live in, magic is often the villain, a curse to be broken by a non-magical prince. But imagine for a moment that you were born into a different life. Imagine that your nursery was lit not by a bulb, but by the tip of a wand. Imagine that the stories read to you at bedtime did not end with a wedding, but with a warning. Tonight, we open the tales of Beedle the Bard. These are the stories that Ron Weasley grew up with. These are the tales that taught young wizards that magic is not a cure for all ills, but a complex, dangerous, and beautiful force. These are stories where pots hop on brass feet, where fountains promise luck but deliver wisdom, and where three brothers meet death on a lonely bridge and try to cheat him. Before we open this ancient, rune-marked volume, we must prepare your mind to receive it. We must shift your consciousness from the chaotic noise of the modern world to the slow, ink-stained quiet of a wizard's study. So, find your place of rest. Settle yourself into the mattress or the chair as if you are settling into a four-poster bed in a high stone tower. The wind is howling outside, perhaps battering against the battlements. But in here, the thick velvet curtains are drawn. The fire is low. You are safe. Close your eyes. Let us begin by casting off the tension of the day, just as one might cast off a heavy travel cloak. Take a deep breath in, imagining the air is filled with the scent of old parchment and wood smoke. And breathe out, long and slow, watching the breath leave you like a grey mist. I want you to visualize your mind as a pensieve, that stone basin used by wizards to store their thoughts. Your mind has been full today, swirling with memories, lists, and worries. Imagine taking your wand, a long, smooth stick of willow or oak, and gently touching it to your temple. One by one, draw out the silver threads of your thoughts, the emails, the conversations, the noise. Pull them out and drop them into the basin. Watch them swirl away, silver and silent, leaving your mind clear, empty, still. Now, bring your attention to your body. We are going to relax it, not just with breath, but with magic. Focus on your feet. Imagine they are resting near the hearth of a common room fire. Feel a warmth, like a gentle warming charm, spreading through your toes. It is a golden, glowing heat that melts the stiffness in your arches and ankles. Let that magical warmth travel up your shins. Your legs are becoming heavy. Not just tired, but heavy with a deep, ancient comfort. Like the roots of the whomping willow, you are tethered to the earth, solid and unmoving. Let the warmth flow into your knees and your thighs. These muscles have carried you through the Muggle world all day. Now, they can let go. Feel the tension dissolving like a potion changing color, from tight and dark to clear and loose. Breathe into your stomach. Let it rise and fall with the rhythm of a sleeping dragon. Slow, deep, powerful. There is no need to hold anything tight. You are protected here. Let the sensation of relaxation drift up your spine. Imagine a cool, soothing hand tracing the line of your back, untying the knots in your shoulders. Your shoulders drop down, inches lower, sinking into the bed. The weight of your robes, the weight of your responsibilities, it is all gone. Down your arms the feeling travels, past the elbows, into your wrists and hands. Your fingers, which do so much work, are now soft and open. They curl gently on the sheets. And finally, your face. Unclench your jaw. Smooth the space between your eyebrows. Let your eyelids feel heavy, as if a sleeping draft is beginning to take effect. A sweet, thick drowsiness is filling your head, quieting the last whispers of the day. You are no longer in your room. You're in the library of the past. The shelves around you reach to the ceiling, filled with books bound in dragonhide and faded velvet. In front of you, floating in the air, is the book we seek, The Tales of Beedle the Bard. The cover is mossy green, the runes upon it shimmering with a faint, silvery light. It smells of history. It smells of secrets. We are going to reach out now, in this space of deep relaxation, and turn the cover. The parchment inside is crisp and yellowed. The ink is black. The first story awaits us. It is not a story of a princess. It is a story of a father, a son, and a legacy that refuses to be ignored. Listen to the scratch of the quill. Listen to the silence of the tower. We are ready to begin. The Wizard and the Hopping Pot. The rain continues its steady, comforting rhythm against the high stone windows. The fire settles into a deep, glowing red. We turn the first page. The parchment is heavy, cream-colored, and smells faintly of crushed herbs and history. We are not going to wait any longer. We are diving straight into the ink. The first tale in our collection is titled The Wizard and the Hopping Pot. Now, to the uninitiated, that title might sound whimsical, perhaps even a little silly. A hopping pot? It brings to mind images of a kitchen mishap. But make no mistake, my friends. In the hands of Beedle the Bard, even the most domestic of objects can become an instrument of gothic torment. This is a story about conscience. It is a story about the noise that guilt makes when we try to shut it out. The story takes us back to the 15th century, to a small stone cottage on the edge of a village. There was once a kindly old wizard who lived there. He was a man of gentle heart and immense, though quiet, power. To his muggle neighbours, the non-magical folk who lived alongside him, he was simply a helpful, perhaps slightly eccentric, old pot-stirrer. He did not wave a wand in their faces. He did not recite incantations in the town square. Instead, he maintained a humble charade. He pretended that his potions, his charms, and his antidotes sprang ready-made from a little cauldron he called his lucky cooking pot. From miles around, the villagers came to him. They brought him their troubles, wrapped in shawls and whispered in hushed tones. A child with a fever, a cow that had gone dry, a crop that refused to grow. And the wizard, with a twinkle in his eye, was pleased to give his pot a stir and put things right. He was the silent guardian of his community. But time, as it does to all men, wizard and muggle alike, eventually claimed him. The kindly old wizard lived to a goodly age, and then he died, leaving all his earthly chattels to his only son. This son was of a very different disposition. Where the father was gentle, the son was hard. Where the father was generous, the son was miserly. The son possessed magic, yes, but he lacked the wisdom to wield it. In his eyes, those who could not work magic were worthless. He looked upon the villagers not as neighbours, but as nuisances. He had often quarrelled with his father, sneering at the old man's habit of dispensing magical aid to common folk. Upon the father's death, the son took possession of the cottage. He began to rummage through the inheritance, looking for gold, for jewels, for books of power. Instead, hidden inside the old, soot-stained cooking pot, he found a small package bearing his name. His heart leaped. Surely this must be a secret treasure, a powerful amulet perhaps? He tore it open, but there was no gold inside. There was only a soft, thick slipper. It was too small to wear, and it had no pair. It was just a single, useless slipper. Pinned to it was a fragment of parchment, written in his father's shaky hand. It read, "In the fond hope, my son, that you will never need it." The son stared at the object in disgust. A slipper? He cursed his father's age-softened mind. He cursed the old man's sentimentality. With a sneer, he threw the slipper back into the cauldron, resolving to use the pot henceforth as a rubbish pail. He turned his back on his father's legacy. But legacy, my friends, has a way of knocking on the door. That very night, a peasant woman knocked on the front door of the cottage. The son opened it, his face set in a scowl. "My granddaughter is afflicted by a crop of warts, sir," she pleaded, wringing her hands in the cold night air. "Your father used to mix a special poultice in that old cooking pot." "Begone," cried the son. "What care I for your brat's warts?" And he slammed the heavy wooden door in the old woman's face. But as soon as the door clicked shut, a sound came from the kitchen. Clang, clang, clang. It was a loud, metallic banging. The wizard lit his wand and walked into the kitchen. There, to his amazement, he saw his father's old cooking pot. It had sprouted a single foot of brass. It was hopping on the spot in the middle of the floor, the brass foot striking the flagstones with a deafening noise. Clang, clang, clang. The wizard approached it in wonder, but as he drew closer, he recoiled. The surface of the pot, once smooth iron, was now covered in warts. Horrible, disfiguring warts, mirroring the affliction of the peasant girl he had turned away. "Disgusting object," he cried. He raised his wand. He tried to vanish the pot, to send it into non-being. But the spell bounced off. He tried to clean it by magic. Nothing happened. He tried to force it out of the house, but the pot would not be moved. Unable to stop it, he ran up the stairs to his bedroom, hoping to escape. But the pot followed. Clang, clang, clang. The story ends, and we are left with the crackling of our own fire. But we must look deeper. What does Dumbledore say about this strange little fable? In his notes, Professor Dumbledore tells us that this story has a troubled history. You see, Beedle was preaching tolerance in a time of fear. He was telling wizards that they had a duty to their non-magical neighbors. This was not a popular opinion. In fact, Dumbledore reveals that by the middle of the 16th century, a different version of this tale was circulating among wizarding families, one that twisted Beedle's message entirely. In this revised, darker version, the hopping pot does not teach the wizard kindness. Instead, it protects him. When the neighbors come with their pitchforks and torches, the pot chases them away, catches them, and swallows them whole. It is a gruesome thought, is it not? A story of vengeance rather than redemption. But history has a way of swinging to extremes. If one version was too dark, the next was too sweet. Decades later, a witch named Beatrix Bloxam took it upon herself to clean up Beedle's tales for children. She believed the original stories were too horrid for young minds. So, she wrote the Toadstool Tales. In her version of the hopping pot, there are no warts, no slugs, and no retching. Instead, she writes of a little golden pot that dances on tiny rosy toes. It cures the dollies of their poorly tum-tums and fills up with sweets for wee Willykins. Dumbledore notes with dry humor that generations of wizarding children have reacted to Mrs. Bloxam's version with uncontrollable retching. We can be thankful, my friends, that we have read the truth tonight. We have seen the warts, we have heard the clanging, and we understand that peace is not found in a golden pot of sweets, but in the quiet conscience of a life lived well. The fire is burning low, the brass foot is silent, the quest for fair fortune. The rain continues its gentle assault on the high tower windows, sealing us into our sanctuary. The firelight has deepened to a rich, glowing amber. We turn the page. The parchment feels smoother here, perhaps less worn by the turning of anxious fingers. We are leaving the domestic confines of the wizard's cottage and stepping out into the open air. Our next tale is titled The Fountain of Fair Fortune. If the hopping pot was a story of the hearth, this is a story of the horizon. It is a quest. It tells of a journey not just up a hill, but into the depths of what we believe will make us happy. Let us drift to an enchanted garden, high on a hill, where the sun is just beginning to rise. The story. Once a year, between the hours of sunrise and sunset on the longest day, the walls of a secret enchanted garden would open. And in that garden flowed the fountain of fair fortune. It was said that a single unfortunate soul, if they could fight their way to the fountain and bathe in its waters, would receive fair fortune forevermore. On the appointed day, hundreds of people gathered outside the walls. They came with their broken hearts, their empty purses, and their ailing bodies. They waited in the darkness of the pre-dawn, pressing against the stone, hoping to be the chosen one. Among this crowd were 3 witches. They did not know each other, but they met on the outskirts of the throng and shared their sorrows. The first was named Asha. She was sick of a malady that no healer could cure. She was frail, her body failing her, and she hoped the fountain would grant her a long life. The second was named Altheda. She had been robbed of her home, her gold, and her wand by an evil sorcerer. She was destitute, powerless, and she hoped the fountain would restore her wealth. The third was named Amata. She had been deserted by a man she loved dearly, and she thought her heart would never mend. She hoped the fountain would take away her grief. Pitying one another, the 3 women made a pact. If one was chosen, they would try to bring the others along. They would reach the fountain together. As the first ray of sun split the sky, a chink in the wall opened. Vines and creepers snaked out from the garden, twisting through the crowd. They wrapped around Asha, the first witch. She grasped the wrist of Altheda, who seized the robes of Amata and Amata. Amata got caught on the armor of a dismal-looking knight seated on a bone-thin horse. The vines tugged them all through the wall, the 3 witches and the knight. The wall sealed shut behind them, leaving the screaming crowd outside. Now, this knight was known as Sir Luckless. He had no magic, he had no skill with a sword. He was simply a man who believed himself to be unlucky. He tried to leave, sure he had no chance against 3 witches, but Amata chided him. "Faint heart," she cried. "Draw your sword, knight, and help us." And so, the unlikely quartet began their ascent through the enchanted garden. They walked through rare herbs and bright flowers until they reached the foot of the hill where the fountain stood. But there, wrapped around the base of the hill, was a monstrous white worm. It was bloated and blind, and it turned a foul face upon them. It spoke a single riddle: "Pay me the proof of your pain." Sir Luckless drew his sword and struck the beast, but his blade snapped. Altheda threw rocks. Amata cast spells, but the worm would not move. It simply waited. The sun rose higher. Asha, the sick witch, exhausted by the struggle, began to weep. She sank to the ground, her tears flowing freely. The great worm moved. It placed its face upon hers and drank the tears from her cheeks. Its thirst assuaged, the worm slithered aside and vanished into a hole in the earth. They had paid the proof of pain. Rejoicing, they began to climb. But halfway up the steep slope, they found words cut into the ground. "Pay me the fruit of your labors." Sir Luckless placed his only coin on the grass, but it rolled away. They walked and walked, but they made no progress. The summit came no nearer. The sun beat down on them. Althea, the poor witch, began to walk faster. She urged the others on. She would not give up. Sweat poured from her brow as she pushed against the magic of the hill. As the drops of sweat fell onto the earth, the inscription vanished. They could move again. They had paid the fruit of their labors. Finally, they reached the summit. They could see the fountain glittering like crystal in a bower of trees, but barring their way was a stream of clear water. Beneath the surface lay a stone that read, "Pay me the treasure of your past." Sir Luckless tried to float across on his shield, but he sank. The witches tried to jump, but the stream was too wide. Amata, the heartbroken witch, understood. She took her wand. She drew from her mind all the memories of the happy times she had spent with her lost lover, the memories she had been clinging to, the memories that caused her such pain. She dropped them into the rushing water. The stream swept them away. Stepping stones appeared. They crossed to the fountain, but now the sun was setting. The sky was turning ruby red. They had to decide who would bathe. Asha, the sick witch, collapsed. She was too weak to climb into the water. She begged them not to touch her. Althea, the poor witch, looked around. She saw the rare herbs growing by the fountain. She realized they were valuable. She quickly gathered them, mixed them in Sir Luckless's water gourd, and poured the potion into Asha's mouth. At once, Asha stood up. She was cured. She did not need the fountain. Althea looked at the herbs in her apron. "If I can cure this disease," she said, "I shall earn gold aplenty. I have no need of the fountain." They turned to Amata, but Amata stood tall. The stream had washed away her regrets. She realized her lover had been cruel and faithless. She was free of him. She was happy. She did not need the fountain. And so the three witches turned to the night. Sir Luckless, astonished by his luck, clanked into the water in the last rays of the sun. He bathed in the fountain of fair fortune. He emerged glowing with triumph. He flung himself at the feet of Amata, the kindest and most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and begged for her hand. And Amata, seeing a man worthy of her heart, accepted. The three witches and the knight walked down the hill together, arm in arm. They all led long, happy lives, and none of them ever suspected that the fountain's waters carried no enchantment at all. The commentary. Let us pause there with that gentle twist of an ending. As the fire crackles in our tower, let us consult the notes of Professor Dumbledore. He tells us that the Fountain of Fair Fortune is a perennial favorite in the wizarding world, beloved for its message that true fortune comes from within. However, like all great stories, it has its detractors. Dumbledore shares a delightful anecdote about a Christmas pantomime at Hogwarts. A professor of herbology decided to stage this story for the students. It did not go well. The worm was provided by the care of magical creatures' teacher, an ashwinder that had been engorged to a gigantic size. During the performance, the ashwinder exploded in a shower of hot sparks, setting the scenery on fire. The students playing Amata and Asha began to duel on stage over a real-life romantic entanglement. The great hall had to be evacuated, and the hospital wing was full for weeks. But beyond the comedy of exploding worms, there is a darker note to the story's history. Dumbledore reveals that a certain Mr. Lucius Malfoy once demanded that this story be banned from the Hogwarts library. Why? Because it depicts a romance between a witch, Amata, and a Muggle knight, Sir Luckless. Mr. Malfoy wrote, "I do not wish my son to be influenced into sullying the purity of his bloodline by reading stories that promote wizard-Muggle marriage." Dumbledore, in his infinite wisdom, refused to remove the book. He noted that so-called pure-blood families maintain their purity by disowning or lying about the Muggles on their family trees. He refused to bow to hypocrisy, and so the story remains. It remains a testament to the idea that magic is not the only source of power. Asha found health through medicine, not magic. Althea found wealth through industry. Amata found peace by letting go of the past, and Sir Luckless, he found confidence simply by believing he was lucky. The fountain was a placebo, but the journey was real. The rain is easing now, turning to a soft mist against the glass. The fire has burned down to glowing embers, warm and deep. We are halfway through our book. The stories thus far have been gentle, filled with lessons of kindness and inner strength. But the next page is different. We are about to leave the sunlit garden and descend into a dungeon. We are about to meet a warlock who thought he could outsmart his own humanity. It is a darker tale, my friends. A gothic horror of the highest order. Are you ready to face the warlock's hairy heart? The gothic heart. The fire in the tower room burns low. The shadows stretch long and thin across the floor, reaching toward us like dark fingers. Outside, the wind has picked up, whistling softly around the stone turrets. It is the perfect atmosphere for a darker tale. We turn the page. The paper here feels different. It is heavier, perhaps a little colder to the touch. We are leaving the sunlit garden of the previous story. We are descending now, down into the cellars, down into the damp, stone-walled dungeons of the human soul. Our next tale is titled The Warlock's Hairy Heart. Be warned, my friends. This is not a story of redemption. It is not a story of luck. It is a gothic horror, as ancient and as chilling as the stone beneath our feet. It speaks of the terrible price of invulnerability. Let us drift back to a time of castles and candlelight. The story. There was once a handsome, rich, and talented young warlock. He had everything a young man could desire. He had gold. He had a castle. He had skill with a wand that was the envy of his peers. But this warlock observed his friends. He watched them fall in love. He saw how they became foolish. He saw them gambling and preening. He saw them lose their appetites and their dignity. He saw them suffering when their hearts were broken. The young warlock resolved never to fall prey to such weakness. He decided that he would never be a slave to emotion, and so he employed the dark arts. One night, in the deepest silence of his castle, he performed a terrible piece of magic. He cut open his own chest, he removed his beating heart, and he locked it away in an enchanted crystal casket. He was free, or so he thought. Unaware of his secret, the warlock's family laughed. They saw him standing so aloof and cold at gatherings. All will change, they prophesied, smiling behind their goblets of wine. All will change when a maid catches his fancy. But the young warlock's fancy remained untouched. Though many a maiden was intrigued by his haughty mien, though they employed their most subtle arts to please him, none succeeded. The warlock's heart felt nothing, because it was not there. He glorified in his indifference. He walked through life untouched by joy, but also untouched by sorrow. The years passed. The freshness of youth waned. The warlock's peers began to wed. They brought forth children. The castle halls of his friends filled with the noise of life. Their hearts must be husks, the warlock sneered inwardly. He looked at the young parents with contempt. He thought of their hearts, shriveled by the demands of these mewling offspring. And once again, he congratulated himself upon the wisdom of his choice. In due course, the warlock's aged parents died. Their son did not mourn them. He did not shed a tear. On the contrary, he considered himself blessed by their demise. Now, he reigned alone in their castle. He transferred his greatest treasure, the crystal casket containing his heart, to the deepest, darkest dungeon. He gave himself over to a life of ease and plenty. His comfort was the only aim of his many servants. He ate the finest food. He drank the richest wine. He slept in the softest bed. He was sure that he must be an object of immense envy to all who beheld him. But one day, he overheard two of his lackeys talking. They were scrubbing the stone floor, unaware that their master was listening from the shadows. The first servant paused and leaned on his brush. "I pity him," he said quietly. "With all his gold and all his power, he is beloved by nobody." But his companion jeered. "Why pity him? A man with so much gold and a palatial castle. If he has no wife, it is because he cannot attract one." Their words were like daggers. They dealt a dreadful blow to the listening warlock's pride. He did not feel hurt, he did not feel sadness, he felt anger. He resolved at once to take a wife. But not just any wife. She would be a wife superior to all others. She would possess astounding beauty, inciting envy in every man who beheld her. She would spring from magical lineage, so their offspring would inherit outstanding gifts. And she would have wealth, at least equal to his own, so that his comfortable existence would be assured. It might have taken 50 years to find such a prize, but it so happened that the very next day, a maiden answering his every wish arrived in the neighborhood. She was a witch of prodigious skill. She possessed much gold, and her beauty was such that it tugged at the heart of every man who set eyes on her. Every man except one. The warlock's heart felt nothing at all, but he saw her value. He saw her as a prize to be won. And so he began to pay her court. The people were amazed. "He has changed," they whispered. "She has succeeded where 100 have failed." But the young woman herself, she was fascinated, and yet she was repelled. She sensed the coldness that lay behind his flattery. She had never met a man so strange, so remote. But her family, eager for the match, pushed her toward him. They accepted his invitation to a great feast in her honor. The night of the feast arrived. The table was laden with silver and gold. Minstrels strummed on silk-stringed lutes, singing of a love their master had never felt. The warlock sat upon a throne beside the maiden. He spoke low. He used words of tenderness he had stolen from the poets, reciting them without any idea of their true meaning. The maiden listened. She looked into his eyes, searching for a spark. Finally, she replied, "You speak well, warlock, and I would be delighted by your attentions. If only I thought you had a heart." The warlock smiled. "You need not fear on that score," he said smoothly. He stood up. He offered her his hand. He bade her follow him. He led her away from the music, away from the warmth of the feast, down the winding stone stairs, down into the cold. They reached the locked dungeon. There, sitting on a pedestal in the darkness, was the enchanted crystal casket. "See?" said the warlock, but the maiden screamed. She was terrified, for the heart inside the casket was not the red, beating thing she expected. Long since disconnected from eyes, ears, and fingers, it had never fallen prey to beauty. It had never known a musical voice. It had never felt the touch of silken skin. The heart had shriveled. And worse, it was covered in long, black hair. "Oh, what have you done?" the maiden lamented, shrinking back against the cold stone wall. "Put it back where it belongs, I beseech you." The warlock saw her fear. He saw that this was necessary to please her. He drew his wand. He unlocked the crystal casket. He sliced open his own breast with a wave of magic, and he replaced the hairy heart into the empty cavity it had once occupied. "Now," he said, turning to her, his chest heaving. "Now you are healed, and you will know true love." The maiden, trembling, stepped forward. She embraced him. The touch of her soft white arms, the sound of her breath in his ear, the scent of her hair, it all pierced the newly awakened heart like spears. But the heart had grown strange during its long exile. It had grown blind and savage in the darkness. Its appetites had become powerful and perverse. Upstairs, the guests began to wonder. Where was their host? Where was the maiden? Hours passed. The music stopped. The food grew cold. Finally, the guests began to search the castle. They checked the towers. They checked the library. And at last, they found the dungeon. A dreadful sight awaited them. The maiden lay dead upon the floor. Her breast had been cut open, and beside her crouched the mad warlock. He held in one bloody hand a great, smooth, shining scarlet heart. Her heart. which he licked and stroked, vowing to exchange it for his own. In his other hand, he held his wand. He was trying to coax from his own chest the shriveled, hairy heart, but the hairy heart was stronger than he was. It refused to let go. It refused to return to the coffin. It clung to him, a parasite of his own making. Before the horror-struck eyes of his guests, the warlock cast aside his wand. He seized a silver dagger. Vowing never to be mastered by his own heart, he hacked it from his chest. For one moment, the warlock knelt triumphant. He clutched a heart in each hand, one scarlet and pure, one black and hairy, and then he fell forward across the maiden's body and died. Slash. The silence in the room is heavy. The fire seems to have dimmed, as if respecting the darkness of the tale. Let us take a deep breath. Let that image fade. We turn to the notes of Professor Dumbledore to help us understand what we have just heard. Dumbledore tells us that this story has survived intact for centuries. It is the most gruesome of Beedle's tales, and many parents hide it from their children until they are older. Why does it survive? Because it speaks to a dark temptation in all of us, the temptation of invulnerability. We all know the pain of a broken heart. We all know the messiness of grief. The warlock decided that emotions were a weakness. He sought to become superhuman, but in doing so, he became inhuman. Dumbledore notes that the term "a hairy heart" has passed into wizarding language. It is used to describe a cold or unfeeling witch or wizard. He also notes a chilling similarity between what the warlock did and the darkest of all magical arts, the creation of a Horcrux. Though the warlock did not split his soul to escape death, he split his nature to escape pain, and the result was a descent into beastliness. It is a warning, my friends. To feel pain is to be human. To lock away our vulnerability is to lock away our very selves. The dungeon is closed now. The warlock and the maiden are gone. We must shake off the chill of the underground. We must return to the surface. Our next tale will take us to the court of a foolish king. It will take us to a washerwoman who laughs too loud, and it will take us to a tree stump that refuses to be silenced. The air is clearing, the fire is brightening, the cackling stump. The fire in the tower room pops loudly, sending a bright spark spiraling up the chimney. It breaks the heavy silence left by the warlock's dark tale. The air feels lighter here, warmer. We are moving away from the suffocating dungeon and stepping into the absurdity of a royal court. We turn the page. The parchment crinkles, a friendly, familiar sound. We have arrived at a story that is, in many ways, the most grounded of them all. It is a story about foolishness. It is a story about arrogance. And it is a story about a washerwoman who knew exactly how to handle a king. Our next tale is titled Babbity Rabbity and Her Cackling Stump. Let us drift to a far-off land where the flags are flying high atop a palace. The story. A long time ago, there lived a foolish king. He was a man of great vanity and very little sense. He decided one day that he alone should have the power of magic. He wanted to be the only sorcerer in his kingdom. So he commanded the head of his army to form a brigade of witch hunters. He issued them a pack of ferocious black hounds, and he read proclamations in every village, wanted by the king, an instructor in magic. Now no true witch or wizard dared volunteer. They were all in hiding, afraid of the brigade and the black hounds. However, a cunning charlatan saw a chance to get rich. He had no magical power at all, but he was a man of great confidence. He arrived at the palace and performed a few simple parlor tricks. He pulled scarves from sleeves. He made coins vanish, and the foolish king was convinced. He appointed the charlatan as his grand sorcerer-in-chief. The charlatan was greedy. He asked for a large sack of gold to buy wands. He asked for rubies to cast curative charms. He asked for silver chalices to mature his potions. And the king, eager to learn, gave him everything. The charlatan stowed the treasure safely in his own house and returned to the palace grounds to teach the king. But he did not know that he was being watched. Peeping from behind her drying sheets was an old woman named Babbity. She was the washerwoman who kept the palace linens soft and white. She watched the charlatan snap 2 twigs from a tree and hand one to the king. "This is a wand of tremendous power," the charlatan lied, "but it will only work when you are worthy of it." Every morning, the charlatan and the king walked in the grounds. They waved their twigs. They shouted nonsense at the sky. They hopped in circles. And one morning, Babbity could not help herself. She began to laugh. She cackled so hard that she sank out of sight behind her laundry basket. The king heard it. He stopped his hopping. He felt undignified. "I grow weary of practice," the king shouted. "When shall I perform real spells?" He declared that the very next day he would perform magic for his entire court, and if anyone laughed, he would have the sorcerer beheaded. The charlatan was terrified. He knew his tricks would not work in front of a crowd. He had nowhere to run. That night, he went to Babbity's cottage. He peered in the window and saw something that stopped his heart. Babbity was sitting at her table, polishing a real wand. In the corner, the king's sheets were washing themselves in a wooden tub. She was a true witch. "Crone!" the charlatan roared, barging in. "You must help me. If you do not, I will denounce you to the brigade of witch hunters." Babbity, being a wise old woman, smiled. She agreed to help. She told him she would hide in a bush during the king's performance and cast the spells for him. The next morning, the court assembled. The lords and ladies gathered on the lawns. The king climbed onto a stage. "I shall make this lady's hat disappear," he cried. He waved his twig. From the bush, Babbity pointed her wand. The hat vanished. The crowd gasped. "Next," shouted the king, drunk on power, "I shall make that horse fly." He waved his twig. Babbity pointed her wand. The horse rose high into the air, hovering above the stunned crowd. "And now," the king declared, looking for a grand finale. The captain of the witch hunters stepped forward. He carried the body of one of the king's black hounds. "Saber died this morning of eating a poisonous toadstool," the captain said. "Bring him back to life, your majesty." The king pointed his twig at the dead dog. But in the bush, Babbity smiled. And she did nothing, for she knew that no magic can raise the dead. The dog did not stir. The crowd began to whisper. Then they began to laugh. The king turned purple. "Why doesn't it work?" he screamed at the charlatan. The charlatan, desperate to save his own neck, pointed a shaking finger at the bush. "There," he shouted. "A wicked witch is blocking your magic. Seize her!" Babbity fled from the bush. The brigade of witch hunters unleashed the hounds. They chased the little old woman across the grass. She reached a low hedge and leaped over it. But when the king and his men scrambled over the hedge, she was gone. There was only an old bent tree standing there. The hounds were barking and scratching at its roots. "She has turned herself into a tree!" screamed the charlatan. "Cut her down!" An axe was brought. With a mighty swing, the tree was felled. The crowd cheered. But as they turned to leave, a sound stopped them cold. Cackle, cackle, cackle. It was coming from the stump. "Fools!" cried a voice from the wood. "No witch or wizard can be killed by being cut in half. Take the axe and cut the grand sorcerer in two, if you do not believe me." The captain raised his axe over the charlatan. The charlatan fell to his knees, confessing everything, begging for mercy. He was dragged away to the dungeons. But the stump was not finished. "You have unleashed a curse upon your kingdom," the stump told the terrified king. "Every time you harm a witch or wizard, you will feel an axe stroke in your own side." The king fell to his knees. He promised to protect all wizards. He promised to let them practice in peace. "Very good," said the stump, "but you have not made amends to Babbity." "Anything," cried the king. "You will erect a statue of Babbity upon me," said the stump. "A statue of pure gold, to remind you of your foolishness." The king agreed. He hurried back to the palace, his face pale as ash. And when the grounds were deserted, a stout, whiskery old rabbit wriggled out from a hole between the roots of the stump. With a wand clamped between her teeth, Babbity Rabbity hopped away into the night, leaving the king to build her golden statue. A log shifts in the fire, settling into the embers. The room is warm and safe. Let us smile for a moment. It is a satisfying ending, is it not? Professor Dumbledore tells us that this story is, in many ways, the most real of Beedle's tales. It teaches us two very important laws of magic. First, it shows us that magic cannot bring back the dead, even when the king demanded it, even when the charlatan's life depended on it. Babbity did not raise the dog. It is a fundamental law of the universe. As the wizarding philosopher Bertrand de Pensées Profondes wrote, "Give it up. It's never going to happen." Second, it gives us one of the earliest literary mentions of an animagus. An animagus is a witch or wizard who can transform into an animal at will. Babbity was not a tree. She was the rabbit hiding beneath the roots. She used a ventriloquism charm to make the stump speak, terrifying the Muggle king with his own superstition. Dumbledore notes that Muggles often believe impossible things about magic, that wizards can turn into trees that talk, or that they can be killed by being cut in half. Babbity used their ignorance against them. She secured safety for her people not through force, but through cleverness. It is a story that reminds us that sometimes the sharpest weapon is not a sword, or even a wand. It is the mind. We have journeyed through 4 tales now. We have seen the domestic, the adventurous, the horrific, and the clever. But there is one tale left. It is the most famous of them all. It is the story that lies at the very heart of wizarding legend. It is a story about 3 brothers, a lonely winding road, and a hooded figure who waits for us all. The rain has stopped. The night is silent. Are you ready to walk the bridge? The bridge to death. The fire in the tower room has burned down to glowing embers. The light is dim, soft, and steady. The shadows in the corners of the room have stopped dancing. They seem to be leaning in, listening. We have reached the final story, the most famous story, the legend that shapes the very concept of mortality in the wizarding world. We turn the page. The parchment here is old, so very old. It feels fragile beneath our fingertips, as if a single breath might turn it to dust. This is the tale of the 3 brothers. It is a legend about the end of the road. It is a legend about the gifts we ask for and the terrible price we pay for receiving them. Let us walk together down a lonely, winding road at twilight. The story. Imagine the scene, if you will. The sun is setting on a world that feels very ancient. The sky is a bruised purple, streaked with veins of grey and charcoal. The wind is picking up, rustling through the dry grass that lines a lonely, winding road. Walking along this road are 3 figures, brothers. They are tall men, their travel cloaks billowing around them in the evening breeze. They walk with the heavy, confident stride of those who know the secrets of the world, for these brothers are learned in the magical arts. They carry wands of ash and yew and oak. They are masters of their craft, believing that there is no obstacle in this world that they cannot overcome with a flick of their wrists. Their journey brings them, eventually, to the edge of a great river. It is not a gentle stream. It is a treacherous, churning body of water. The current is black and fast, swollen with rain. It rushes past with a roar that drowns out the wind. It is too deep to wade through and far too dangerous to swim across. Most travelers, faced with such a barrier, would turn back. They would accept defeat. They would find another way, or they would simply go home. But these brothers were not most travelers. They stood on the muddy bank, looking down at the swirling black water. They did not speak. They simply raised their arms in unison. With a lazy, practiced wave of their wands, they wove magic into the air. Beams of light erupted from their wands, knitting together in the space above the water. Stone formed from nothingness. Arches rose from the depths, and in moments, a bridge appeared. A solid stone structure, arching gracefully over the deadly water. They stepped onto it, their boots echoing against the stone, ready to cross to safety. They felt a surge of pride. They had conquered the elements. They had tamed the wild river. But they were only halfway across when the air grew freezing cold. A shadow materialized in the center of the bridge. It blocked their path. It was a tall figure, draped in a hooded cloak that seemed to be woven from the darkness itself. It was Death, and Death spoke to them. His voice was not like a human voice. It sounded like the grinding of stones, like the whispering of dry leaves in a graveyard. He was angry. You see, Death felt cheated. Usually, this river claimed the lives of those who tried to cross. Travelers would drown in the icy depths, and their souls would belong to him. But these three wizards, with their clever magic, had survived. They had robbed him of 3 new victims. But Death is cunning. He did not attack them. He did not draw a scythe. Instead, he smiled beneath his hood. He pretended to congratulate them. He praised their skill. He told them that such clever wizards, who had defied the natural order, deserved a reward. He said that each of them had earned a prize for having been clever enough to evade him. The first brother, the oldest, stepped forward. He was a combative man, a warrior. He looked at Death not with fear, but with ambition. He did not want gold. He did not want knowledge. He wanted dominance. He asked for a wand, but not just any wand. He asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence, a wand that would always win duels for its owner, a wand worthy of a wizard who had conquered Death. Death turned slowly to the riverbank. There, standing silhouetted against the dying light, was an elder tree. Its branches were gnarled and old, reaching up like skeletal fingers against the darkening sky. Death crossed to the tree. He snapped a branch from it. With long, pale fingers, he fashioned it into a wand. He handed the elder wand to the oldest brother. It hummed with power. It felt cold and heavy and dangerous. Then, the second brother stepped forward. He was the middle child. He was an arrogant man. He looked at Death and saw a being that had been tricked. He decided he wanted to humiliate Death even further. He did not just want to survive Death, he wanted to reverse it. He asked for the power to recall others from Death. Death bent down. He reached into the rushing water of the river. He picked up a simple, smooth black stone from the riverbank. He handed it to the second brother. He told him that this stone, this simple pebble, would have the power to bring back the dead. And then Death turned his hooded face to the third brother. The youngest brother was different. He was the humblest and the wisest of the 3. He did not trust this hooded figure. He did not trust the cold glint in Death's eye. He knew that gifts from enemies are often traps. He did not ask for power. He did not ask to break the laws of nature. He asked only for something that would allow him to go forth from that place without being followed by Death. Death paused. He was reluctant. This was the only gift that would truly allow the wizard to escape him. But he had made a promise. A contract had been struck on that bridge, so slowly, unwillingly, Death reached up. He removed his own cloak. It was the cloak of invisibility. It shimmered like water, fluid and silvery, slipping through the fingers like smoke. It was the only thing that could hide a man from the gaze of the end. He handed the cloak to the youngest brother. Then, Death stood aside. The path was clear. The 3 brothers walked off the bridge, their hearts pounding with adrenaline, talking with wonder of the adventure they had had, and admiring the prizes they had won. But they did not stay together. Gifts of such power drive wedges between men. In due course, the brothers separated, each for his own destination. Let us follow the first brother. He traveled for a week or more, clutching his elder wand. The power of it intoxicated him. He felt invincible. He reached a distant village and sought out a fellow wizard with whom he had an old quarrel. He challenged him to a duel. It was barely a fight. With the elder wand in his hand, the brother could not lose. The magic that poured from the wand was devastating. He left his enemy dead on the floor. But victory breeds arrogance. That night, the oldest brother went to an inn. He drank wine. He became loud. He boasted to the patrons of the wand he had snatched from death himself. He told them it made him powerful, untouchable. But the eyes of men are filled with envy. Late that night, as the oldest brother lay sleeping, wine-sodden and defenseless upon his bed, another wizard crept into his room. The thief saw the wand lying on the bedside table. He reached out and took it, and then, for good measure, to ensure the owner would never come looking for it, he slit the oldest brother's throat, and so, death took the first brother for his own. Now, let us follow the second brother. He journeyed to his own home, a quiet house where he lived alone. The silence there was heavy. He sat in his empty room, clutching the cold black stone. He wanted his love back, the girl he had hoped to marry, before she had died an untimely death. He took the stone. He turned it thrice in his hand. The air in the room shimmered. A figure appeared before him. It was her. It was the girl. He reached out to her, his heart soaring with joy, but his hand passed through her. She was sad. She was cold. She was separated from him as if by a misty veil. Though she had returned to the mortal world, she did not truly belong there. She suffered. The second brother watched her misery. He realized that he had dragged her from her peace into a half-life of sorrow, driven mad with hopeless longing. Unable to be with her in life, he made a terrible choice. He killed himself, so as truly to join her. And so, death took the second brother for his own. But what of the third brother? Death searched for him. He searched for years. He searched in the cities and in the forests. He searched in the shadows and in the light. But he was never able to find him. The youngest brother kept the cloak wrapped tight around him. He lived a long life, a hidden life. He grew old in peace, watching the seasons turn, watching his children grow. It was only when he had attained a great age, when his bones were weary and his work was done, that he finally took off the cloak of invisibility. He called his son to his side. He placed the shimmering fabric in the young man's hands, passing on the legacy of protection. And then, the youngest brother stood up. He did not run. He did not fight. He greeted death as an old friend. He went with him gladly, and, as equals, they departed this life, the legacy and the hallows. The fire in the tower room burns low. The embers pulse with a deep red heat, like the slow beat of a sleeping heart. The room feels smaller now, intimate. We have finished the stories, but we have not finished the history. We are about to step out of the fairy tale and into the cold, hard facts of wizarding lore. We turn to the back of the book. The handwriting here is familiar. It is the spidery, looping script of Albus Dumbledore. He offers us a final glimpse into the shadows cast by the three brothers. This story, he tells us, was a favorite of his youth. It was the tale he demanded most often at bedtime, a preference that sparked many arguments with his brother, Aberforth, who found comfort in simpler, grubbier tales of goats. But why did this story linger so heavily in Dumbledore's mind? Perhaps because the moral is so stark, so unyielding. As he writes, human efforts to evade or overcome death are always doomed to disappointment. The third brother is the hero not because he fights death, but because he accepts it. He understands the fundamental truth, that having escaped the end once, the best one can hope for is to postpone the inevitable meeting. However, human nature is a stubborn thing. We do not like inevitable meetings. We do not like endings. And so, a curious legend grew up around this story. A legend that whispers that the gifts death gave, the unbeatable wand, the resurrection stone, and the invisibility cloak, are not just metaphors. It claims they are real objects, tangible and powerful, and it promises that if a person were to unite all three, they would become the master of death. Let us look at these objects through the lens of history. Let us see if the legend holds weight. First, the cloak. Dumbledore notes that invisibility cloaks are not unknown in our world. They are rare, yes, and valuable. But they are often flawed. They fade with time. They tear. The charms upon them wear thin, revealing the wearer to the world. But the cloak in the story is different. It is described as uniquely durable. It endures forever. It protected the third brother, then his son, and his son's son, passing down through generations without losing its shimmer or its secrecy. Yet, in all the centuries between Beedle's day and our own, no one has ever publicly claimed to have found Death's own cloak. Then, there is the stone, the resurrection stone. This is the most tragic of the Hallows. It preys on our deepest grief. Dumbledore reminds us that necromancy, the art of raising the dead, is a branch of magic that has never truly worked. Dark wizards have created in theory, ghastly puppets reanimated by dark magic, but these are shells, not souls. Beedle's story is explicit on this point. The second brother's love did not truly return. She was sent by death to lure him. She was cold, remote, separated by a veil. She was both present and absent. The stone offers only the illusion of comfort, a cruel trap for the grieving heart. But finally, we come to the wand. Here, the obstinate believers have something real to hold on to. Here, the trail moves from legend into history. The history of wizardry is stained with the blood of those who sought the Elder Wand. It has been called by many names: the Wand of Destiny, the Death Stick, and unlike the cloak or the stone, we can trace its path through the ages. Dumbledore lists the men who have held it. It is a roster of violence. There was Emeric the Evil, a short-lived but exceptionally aggressive wizard who terrorized the south of England in the early Middle Ages. He died as he lived, in a ferocious duel. A century later came Godolo, the author of Magic Most Evil. He possessed a wand he called My Most Wicked and Subtle Friend. He perished in his own cellar, locked away and starved by his own mad son, Hereward. Then came Barnabas Deverell and the notorious Loxias, who rechristened the wand the Death Stick and used it to lay waste to anyone who displeased him. What is the pattern here? Dumbledore points it out with chilling clarity. Every man who claimed to own the unbeatable wand was beaten. Every man who boasted of the Death Stick eventually met death at its tip. It attracts trouble, Dumbledore says, just as Grumble the grubby goat attracted flies. There is an old superstition among wand-makers, a warning passed down through the ages. Wand of Elder, never prosper. It is a wood that is not favored, perhaps because it has passed through so many dark hands, absorbing the dangerous habits of its masters. It is a wand that knows no loyalty but power. So, what is the legacy of the three brothers? It is not a recipe for immortality. It is a mirror reflecting our own flaws. Dumbledore concludes with a thought that echoes in the silence of this tower. He observes that humans have a knack for choosing precisely those things that are worst for them. We lust for the wand of power, though it leads to violence. We yearn for the stone to bring back the past, though it leads to madness. But the wisest choice, the choice of the third brother, to simply be invisible, to live a life protected, and to greet the end as a friend, that is the choice even the greatest wizards struggle to make. Even Dumbledore admits that he too would find it easiest to refuse the invisibility cloak. The fire has crumbled to ash, the stories are done, the history is told. It is time to close the book. It is time to blow out the candle. The last echo of Dumbledore's wisdom fades into the high, vaulted ceiling of the tower. The fire is now just a bed of soft, pulsing coals, a deep, sleepy orange in the darkness. The rain has stopped entirely, leaving only the vast, silent night outside the windows. We have reached the end. With a gentle, heavy sigh, we close the back cover of the green, velvet-bound book. Thump. The sound is soft. It is the sound of a journey completed. The silver runes on the cover catch the last of the firelight one final time. And then they too go dark. The stories are sleeping now. We have traveled a long way together tonight, my friends. We started in a small stone cottage with a clanging pot and a guilty conscience. We walked through an enchanted garden where luck was nothing more than belief. We descended into a cold dungeon to witness the folly of a heart locked away. We stood in a royal court and watched a washerwoman outsmart a king. And finally, we stood on a bridge at twilight and learned that the only way to greet the end is as a friend. These stories, preserved by Beedle the Bard, translated by Hermione Granger, and illuminated by Albus Dumbledore, are more than just ink on parchment. They are maps. They map the landscape of the human and the wizarding heart. They remind us that magic, for all its sparks and wonders, is not a solution to the ache of living. A wand cannot mend a broken trust. A stone cannot bring back a lost moment. A potion cannot make us brave. Those things, the true magic, must come from within us. And now, it is time to leave the library. Visualize yourself standing up from the deep, velvet armchair. You feel heavy, warm, and completely relaxed. Your limbs are loose. Your mind is quiet. The tension you brought with you into this room hours ago is gone, left behind in the pages of the book. You take one last look around the circular room. You see the rows of ancient books slumbering on their shelves. You see the portraits on the walls, their subjects snoozing in their frames. You feel the safety of this place, the stone walls that have stood for 1,000 years, holding you, protecting you. You walk to the door, you open it, and step out onto the spiral staircase. But you do not need to walk down. In this place, between waking and sleeping, you can simply float. You drift down, past the high windows, past the sleeping castle, down into the deep velvet darkness of your own rest. You are back in your own bed now. Feel the mattress beneath you. It is softer than any cloud. Feel the blanket over you. It is warmer than any cloak. The wizarding world is fading. The hopping pots and the cackling stumps, the fountains and the bridges, they are drifting away like mist over a lake. They are returning to the realm of dreams. And you are going with them. Your breath is slow, in and out, in and out. There is nothing left to do. There are no more pages to turn. There are no more lessons to learn tonight. There is only the quiet. There is only the dark. There is only the peace of a story well told. Let the words I have spoken settle in your mind like falling snow. Let them cover you in a blanket of calm. You are safe. You are loved. You are home. Sleep now, my dear wanderers. Let the stories guide you. I will see you again in the quiet corner of the evening. Stay safe and sweet dreams.